Thank you very much. That's a nice introduction, and thank you everyone for interrupting your hangovers and your Sundays and your family commitments to see me. It's always good being the first one on after inexplicably the after party is put on the night before. But here I am today. Can I walk around? We mic'd up? Here we are today to talk about Litecoin and central bank digital currencies. So I know a lot about one of them, and I'm not necessarily an expert in the other. But I'm going to tell you what I do know. But I'm going to start first, if this remote works, with a bit about me. So I was born with curiosity in my blood. My dad's here. He can put up his hand if he feels comfortable. But I've always been curious, and one of the things I've been curious about is emerging technology. So I started investing in Litecoin and cryptocurrency in 2015, thanks to another person in the crowd here. But I became really emotionally invested in it in 2016, which sounds nice. It's a lovely sentiment, isn't it? Thanks very much for the round of applause there. But what that meant really was that I wasn't just necessarily looking at it as an investment opportunity, but something more deep. And what I found was there was a big gap in the market, and there was no market in what I'm talking about. But in terms of creativity, strategy, and I guess the maturation of the way that coins, tokens, and projects were presenting themselves in the space. So I started a creative agency called the Tokens Agency. Now, if you Google it, it's dead now. Didn't last the winter. But what it did was it afforded me the right to work on some of the world's biggest projects. I won't name all of them, but I've worked for Cool Wallet, Binance, BTC Markets in Australia, and it led me to meeting Charlie Lee. So again, thanks to someone in the crowd here, they introduced me to Charlie Lee via Signal, I think, or Telegram, can't remember which one. And in 2017, I flew over and tapped him on the shoulder with a 65-page document saying, I'd love to rebrand Litecoin. Now, naively, I forgot that Litecoin was decentralized, so therefore there was no single person or authority who could authorize a rebrand. But the Litecoin Foundation, of which I'm one of the directors and creative director now, did actually say that it was the officially endorsed brand. So that was a nice milestone for me. And here I am presenting to Charlie, that's the top left, and then that's dinner with all my fellow directors of the Litecoin Foundation. So some of the things that we've been doing, so you can see the top left is the branding that I presented, and then bottom left is it being bled on by a bunch of men sweating, which is always lovely. It's a nice thing to add to a case study. So obviously we're focused on branding and we're focused on marketing and bringing a bit of maturation in that way. We're partnered with the UFC, the Miami Dolphins, NASCAR, but my focus has really been on awareness and education of Litecoin, its benefits, use cases, and again, around adoption and utility. And this is why I'm talking to you today. The utility of Litecoin is eerily similar to that of the proposed CBDCs. So, what is a CBDC? It's a very good question. So central bank digital currencies, and I'm by no means an expert, what they are is they are digital derivatives. So effectively, broadly speaking, they are digital representations of a fiat currency. So in their simplest terms, they represent the digital currency of a certain country, and it's been issued by the central bank of that country. Now, in our case, that would be the Australian dollar. Fortunately, the Australian pilot for the CBDC hasn't gone so well, but more on that in a second. Why this is really important at the moment is the fact that 130 countries around the world have either implemented some form of CBDC, so in China and Russia, they already have it active, or they're in the final stages of prototyping their CBDC. It's a lot of stage. I should probably walk around a bit more. Is that better? Can I get a little yes or no? Yeah. All right. A bit of audience interaction is always perfect. Thank you very much. But 130 countries are in various stages of implementing or prototyping or exploring a CBDC. The more important figure here is the 98% of the world's GDP is within those 130 countries. So they're not necessarily tiny countries. These are big controllers, big economies. So what central bank digital currencies propose is faster transactions and settlement times. So it's a big issue. Obviously, we've got OSCO in Australia, which is sort of a layer 2 solution, I guess you'd say, through a financial institution. But again, these CBDCs will be issued by the central bank. So there's not necessarily going to be any interaction with third parties such as OSCO. But they are promising to do cheaper and faster payments. There's also cheaper and faster remittance opportunities that come with CBDCs. Again, it's unclear as to, because of Australia's failed prototype at the moment, or pilot is what they're calling it. It's very unclear as to which countries will be having these cheaper and faster remittance payments and rails with, but that will hopefully become clearer over the next few years. So this all sounds good. Well, we'll get to that because it is a bit too good to be true. Litecoin is not issued by a central bank, and it's one of the things that actually attracted me to the space, and one of the things which in 2016, that was what made me emotionally invested. I'm not necessarily values-based in many things, but this really struck the chord with me in terms of, I guess, decentralisation, financial freedom, and independence. So for the last 12 years, Litecoin has been a successful digital decentralised currency, and it's the oldest surviving altcoin as well. So there are, I think, 55 projects between Bitcoin and Litecoin coming into existence, and all of them are at the bottom of some altcoin grave. Like Bitcoin, Litecoin its intention is to be for everyone and designed to be for everyone. So regardless of where you live in the world, all you need is an internet connection to mine it and effectively issue it to yourself. Thank you very much, everyone, for coming in now. Issue it to yourself, and you don't even necessarily need an internet connection to actually get Litecoin or Bitcoin. People can give it to you on a piece of paper. But at the core, what it represents is freedom, control over your money, and opportunities. And that's a really important thing when we're in the state that we are, and there's an approximated 1.6 to 1.9 billion unbanked around the world. So as I said before, Litecoin can be issued by anyone. This is my desk, actually, back in 2018. That's a little miner that's stuck in as a USB. As you can see, the technology is very old because it's USB and not USB-C. Thank you, Apple, for ruining everything. But that's a USB miner, so a very, very low hash capability or ability to mine. But I gave it to all my staff, so I had 9 staff at the time. Each of them got one of these miners, and there's no better way to learn than to actually practically mine yourself. So in effect, what they were able to do was issue their own Litecoin, unlike a CBDC, which will be issued by the central bank. So I guess the motivation behind this being the millions of individuals, and hopefully some of those individuals around the world, who are currently mining Litecoin, what they are doing is they're holding up a really good case study of what a decentralised digital currency looks like. The other thing is, we're in a world that everyone needs currencies, and currencies that aren't necessarily controlled by anyone. And this is Litecoin and Bitcoin. You can see there, I threw a Bitcoin chew toy to one of the dogs at the office. He loved it. But I guess what I was referring to earlier is that we won't have the same rights afforded to us with the CBDC. So referring to a paper that was released very recently, so at the end of October, it actually said that the CBDC pilot, so I'm reading from the screen because it's pretty funny, it promised to open up the future to the unbanked. It was very unclear, particularly in this paper, as to what that looked like and what the roadmap for opening up to the unbanked looked like. And I guess we're in the fortunate situation in Australia where we don't have an extremely high percentage of people who are unbanked. But around the world, as I said, there's 1.6 to 1.9 billion. My hope is that the CBDC does work in some ways, but I know that Litecoin works. So we've processed 180 million transactions on-chain on the Litecoin network. There's an 84 million cap supply, so this has been designed and programmed into Litecoin. This can't be changed, and this is really important in a world which is suffering from inflation and obviously quantitative easing. So I don't know how many, my dad in the audience will probably be able to say, but I don't know how many trillions the US government printed last week, but it would have been quite a few. Probably billions, not trillions. I know that over the last 12 years, the mean and average fee has been 0.0007 cents. That's US cents, sorry. So the conversion would be about 0.0011 cents per fee, and that's agnostic of how much is being sent. The reconciliation, or sorry, I should say settlement, is on average over the last 12 years, it's been 2 minutes. And that's anywhere around the globe. So if you think about the Western Unions of this world and even the banks, when you send money across borders or send it overseas, it can be up to 3-4 working days. It's been operational obviously for 12 years, 24 hours a day, doesn't close. We also have opt-in privacy. So this would require an entirely new talk, but there's a thing called MWeb. I don't like the name either, but it stands for Mimble Wimble Extension Blocks. Something to do with Harry Potter and extension blocks is all I know. But what I do know is that it offers opt-in confidential transactions. So what this means is you can obfuscate, which is a word I've never been able to say, your address and the amount you're sending, or the receiver's address and the amount they're actually receiving. So one use case for this would be if you were paying people in Litecoin from a business account, for instance, and you had 10 employees and one was on an astronomical amount of money and the other, who thought that they were worth it, was not, they could actually easily trace back to the business's Litecoin address and see that Tony is being paid less than Robbie, which is usually the case. Sorry, Tony. There's no Tony in the audience. This is going down well. Everyone's hungover and not funny, that's all right. But what this optional confidential transaction allows you to do is to add that layer of privacy and protection. And more importantly, and probably most importantly, there's been zero downtime in 12 years. The same can't be said for the RBA. So the RBA and some of the world's biggest banks, and I'll just refer to the ones in Australia, they've experienced downtime. So in October 2022, the Reserve Bank of Australia experienced a full shutdown of their fast settlement service and low value clearing and settlement services. The outage lasted 36 hours and they're still yet to reveal what the cause was. They just said there was a technical issue. Now, this is also the RBA, which is going to be and has been spearheading the pilot project for the CBDC in Australia. So it doesn't exactly, I guess, elicit confidence in me, and I'm not sure how many other people it would give confidence to. The other thing is the banks are broken as well, and they've been exposed many, many times. Most significantly, the Commonwealth Bank in July experienced an almost 2-day shutdown, and in September 23, ANZ had I think it was across every single one of their digital platforms, including their ATMs, was shut down for 24 hours. So there's a lot of things which I'm claiming here, and I'll make the citations available at the end, so don't think that I'm just another crypto bro spitting wicked wisdom in your ear. But I guess what I'm saying is 12 years uninterrupted, 180 million transactions. Litecoin has been, I guess, battle tested, to use a term I hate, whereas the RBA, which is trying to implement the CBDC in Australia, has failed dismally. And I guess don't get me started on Optus. So that's one of the reasons why this presentation isn't great. It's fantastic actually, but is because So I guess the question is, do I or do you want a CBDC programmed and controlled by the government? Oh, I wasn't expecting anyone to answer. That's great. If you can wait though, because I've got like in 2 slides I answer. But this is the same thing which has been run by the RBA and another organisation that has already failed. And while it would be cool to have my face on money, like to Photoshop there, not Photoshop, Canva. It'd be cool to have my face on money, but it's also terrifying. Like, I'm worried about surveillance. I'm worried about privacy. I don't have a tinfoil hat on. But if you think about it, it is rounding out the holy trinity of surveillance across the world. And we're fortunate enough to live in democracy, but there are places like China, I'm sure you guys have heard of it, which are not necessarily as democratic, and they've rolled out a CBDC already. And they've prevented people not only from spending on certain things and supporting certain organisations that the Communist Party does not necessarily support, but they've stopped people from travelling. And they've also traced people's transactions and seen where they are. So it's another way of, I guess, surveilling them. But I don't really want the government to know what I'm spending my money on. I certainly don't want them to prohibit me from spending my money or applying for a loan or declining me for a loan or looking at my credit and seeing how dismal it is, even though I've tried to plump it up over the last few years to make myself look better for a home loan. This will destroy all that. And while money makes the world go round, I'm not necessarily thinking that CBDCs will stop that. I am worried about the fact that money makes the world go round. There's a reason why that saying exists. And what happens if into that money is programmed, I guess, your inability to have a private life and independence and control over your money? Fortunately, the Australian government has spent $180 million on this failed CBDC pilot. So they released only a few weeks ago, I'll quote this, the Australian CBDC pilot for digital finance innovation project report. So that was from the RBA in conjunction with another acronym, which is awesome, DFCRC, which stands for Digital Finance Cooperative Research Centre. So in this report, they detailed a lot of things. They detailed their successes. Their successes included being able to connect to a bank, so that was cool. It's never been done before. They did not list out any of their failures, yet what they have said is that the pilot is on hold. So $180 million later, the pilot's on hold, and what they've said or promised is that by mid-2024, the same co-op is going to release another paper detailing what the next steps are. So who knows? But I guess that's kind of good for us in the sense that we don't have to worry just yet. We've got a few years until CBDC is rolled out in Australia, but globally, other countries are not going to be so fortunate. So I asked the question before and, I pressed the wrong button. I asked the question before and you guys answered, so that's sort of ruined the surprise. Am I in favour of the proposed central bank digital currency in Australia? And this is coming right back to the start. It's the title of the presentation, which is Litecoin versus CBDC. So if you gave me the choice between Litecoin, which is decentralised, I have control over it, I can effectively issue it, it gives me financial independence and it's had zero downtime for the last 12 years. Or conversely, Australia's digital currency with a failed pilot run by the RBA with a track record of having technical issues, which they couldn't resolve for 36 hours, and allowing the government to have unprecedented surveillance over me and my family and I guess my friends and all of you. I guess the answer is simple. And that is, oh, hang on, another giggle there. No, I wouldn't want it. So if you'd like to know more about Litecoin, you can scan this QR code. It'll also give you 20% off the shop. Yep, that's a little shill. I found out the margins are only 23%, so there you go. We're only making 3% on top of that. All donations go to developing the awareness and adoption of Litecoin through the Litecoin Foundation. And you can also reach out to me, so I'm pretty easily available via email at robbie@litecoin.net. But I'll take questions. Is that cool?
Absolutely.
Love questions.
Any questions for Robbie?
Oh, thank you, yeah.
I guess, given the Optus debacle,
Yes.
and the fact that 10 million account holders were in strife,
Sure.
it sort of did underline that maybe even FPOS, which is pretty one step close towards CBDCs, we're not ready for that, right? So, like, what would need to happen to make sure they would even work, let alone whether it was Litecoin or even a CBDC?
I think the government's, I mean, I've been fortunate enough to talk to various stakeholders. This is many years ago, but they've always struggled with how to tax crypto. They've then struggled how to, I guess, track and trace who owns cryptocurrency in Australia, which is not necessarily a bad thing. Hello members of the ATO. If you are trying to just live your life, I guess my issue is that they've got a lack of experience in this area, and there's a couple of thousand people out there who are either, and I don't use the word expert, but either well-versed in digital currencies and cryptocurrencies, which is effectively what a CBDC is. It's just been issued by a central bank. So that's what I have the issue with. Excuse me for using issue twice in a sentence. But I just think the lack of experience, lack of knowledge, and I guess lack of wanting to engage people who they deem to be potentially the people they're trying to circumvent, which is us. Yeah.
Any questions for Robbie, guys? Cool. Give him a big round of applause. Oh, sorry, go on.
Thank you. Hello. Yeah. It's a good question. So, I mean, in terms of fluctuation of price of Litecoin, that will flatten with the more people that use it. So I think, it's pretty simple to say that, it's pretty simple to promise that it won't fluctuate as much as the dollar, for instance. It's going to be untrue and it's a lie. But the more people that use it, and it's been proven over time, the price is flattened. And by that I mean the highs are smaller and the lows are smaller. And hopefully with the maturation of the market overall, and I'm not just talking about Litecoin, but Bitcoin, Ethereum, all the blue chips and proven cryptocurrencies, hopefully the fluctuation in price will stabilise. But I also think that conversely, you look at the Australian dollar and it's always a dollar for us. But what that dollar buys us isn't what necessarily it bought us a couple of years ago. So, we are experiencing inflation in Australia, and admittedly it's not as high as in other countries, but I think it's all about value, to be honest. So we're experiencing, I guess, a loss in some real terms anyhow.
Great question, thank you. Any more?
Hi. That's okay. Oh, there we go. Whale in the house. Love that. Yeah. Yeah. So the question is, if I'm not mistaken, so in framing up Litecoin as silver to Bitcoin's gold, and how to compete with Bitcoin or how we plan on competing, the answer is we have no plans. And again, it's a decentralized currency, so I speak on behalf of the foundation that helps with the promotion and adoption of Litecoin, but nothing else. So this is sort of just my opinion, but what I do know from trolling Charlie Lee's Bitcoin talk forum recently, and you can read about that, is that it was never intended to kill Bitcoin or replace Bitcoin. In fact, it's intended kind of like silver to be more as an everyday transaction, so to complement Bitcoin, which is a better store of value. And I don't have any argument, I don't think anyone would argue that Bitcoin's a better store of value, but it is also undeniable that it's slower, and there's good reason for that. So it's not made for microtransactions or necessarily remittance transactions. It's more of a store of value. So I think the opportunity for Litecoin is for everyday use. And again, we're already seeing that. So BitPay being the biggest processor in the space, Litecoin is consistently second in terms of most used on BitPay. Sorry, that was a stumbly sentence. Thank you for the question.
Great question. Any more? One over here.
Yep. It's a really good question. So with proof of work systems like Litecoin, so Litecoin runs on the script algorithm, so it's not the same as Bitcoin, which is SHA-256, I think, if I'm not wrong. Eddie, can you give me a yes? Thank you. So with more miners comes more stability and security. So again, we talk about decentralization, and it's not necessarily about, I guess, the percentage of wealth that's in wallets. One of the metrics of decentralization is how many people are actually helping unlock the blocks. So if we talk about the stability and security of the network, the more miners, the better. And I think it's a tribute to the miners who, in some way, shape or form have probably been the most key and vital to the success and maintenance of Litecoin. But also sometimes it's not rewarding to be a miner on Litecoin. It's more rewarding to mine Doge or something like that, but people still do. It probably doesn't answer your question, but there's obviously financial reward, but there's also the reward of helping maintain and support and secure a network.
Thank you. Anyone else? We've got one right at the back. You're probably going to have to shout because I don't have my roving
Shout.
mic. Oh, that's brilliant.
Great voice. Yep. Oh, so when I say issuing, what I mean is, so obviously they can't print it themselves, but to this lady's question before, the miners, so they're rewarded, so for their work, so for their proof of work. So with a proof of work, I guess, coin or token, what they are is they're rewarded for the, I guess, expenditure that they have to use on electricity and mining equipment and time, computing power. They're rewarded with basically, I think it's 6.25 Litecoin at the moment. So, and that's shared among all the miners. So that's how the circulation of Litecoin actually happens. With every block, 6.25 Litecoin are distributed. They're shared amongst all those that help secure the network, being the miners, as rewards for their time and effort. But also that controls the supply. So I think it's in 2156 is going to be the last Litecoin to be mined, and it's going to take roughly 2.5 years to mine it.
Wow.
Whereas it doesn't take nearly that long at the moment. I think it's 12 minutes, 12.5 minutes. Eddie, is that right? Thank you. Eddie's the guy.
Incredible.
All
Robbie,
right.
keep doing what you're doing, mate.
Oh, okay.
Very good.
Answer it. No, thank you very much.
Good.
Appreciate it.
Big round of applause. Thanks, guys.
Yep.